Downtown, can you hear us?
We can hear you. Thank
All
you.
right, great. Polytechnic,
Microphone for us.
Polytechnic.
Polytechnic campus, we can hear you, Penny.
all right, Scotty. Tempe, LaDawn, can you hear me? West Campus, please.
We can hear you.
All right. Okay. I'm going to smash this calls to order. Now we have a quorum calculation question that will proceed. Maria?
Okay, everyone, so you should be able to see. Give me 1 second. Right now, quorum question, and it asks, which campus do you represent? The options are A for downtown, B for Polytechnic, C for Tempe, or D for West. Okay, a couple of more seconds to cast your vote. Stopping the poll. We're going to do a follow-up question. Give me 1 second. Okay, the follow-up question reads, true or false? A Qualtrics survey seeking nominations for spring elections was emailed on Wednesday, January 25th, 2023 to all senators. Your options are true, false, or plead the fifth, you don't remember. Okay, we're ending the poll. And we have quorum, Penny.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go right into the chair's report here. First of all, ASU Faculty Senate, welcome to 2023. I hope you all had a good break and are ready for this year. Just as we were getting back to some sort of normalcy after the pandemic, we have fresh challenges, as always. But specifically, I want to talk just briefly about AI and DEI. In December 2022, the floodgates opened on generative AI as it became available to the wider public. Don't worry, this is not going to be an exhaustive review of the latest in AI. We are already deluged by articles and reports every day, but I do want to stress just a couple of things. The spread of misinformation and fake news in AI-generated content can be difficult to distinguish from authentic material, and it poses problems in education when trying to promote and cultivate critical thinking. The possible creation of biased or harmful content, if the AI is trained on biased data, or if the content generated reinforces harmful stereotypes, it can harm society. And there is more that could be said, but it is important for developers, policymakers, and society as a whole to consider the potential risks and work towards responsible and ethical use of generative AI. To that end, a new provost committee has been created, Generative AI in Education, which will look at the ramification of a technology that has the potential for beneficial outcomes and perhaps undesirable outcomes. We will have a report from the committee in the future. So we're all going to look forward to that, I'm sure. Full disclosure, much of the preceding comments were generated by ChatGPT. From the question, is generative AI dangerous? Okay. I still had a wordsmith at just a touch, but that's how good it can be. Okay. Another topic, and this was not AI, Another topic to be very aware of is the current attack on DEI in our schools. From the ignorant and punitive rejection of African-American studies by Governor DeSantis in Florida to the actions of our own Superintendent Tom Horn here in Arizona, who has abolished the Arizona Department of Education's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department, there are troubling currents ahead.
Lost audio.
Who just lost audio? Okay, well, I'm gonna forge ahead here. Can you hear me now? All right, well, at a recent Arizona Educator Conference, Horn removed presentations from the agenda on racial trauma, on gratitude, creating a culture of care, diversity and equity skills for school leaders and family engagement. It is a dangerous and ignorant place that these politicians are steering America towards, an America based on exclusion of anyone not in a particular conformist silo. DEI is important in education because it prepares students for diverse and global society by exposing them to a range of perspectives and cultures. It develops critical thinking and empathy skills by encouraging students to consider and reject diverse diverse perspectives. I believe DEI education is essential for creating a better society, and that universities must fight back against the silencing of educational policies that don't agree with the new exclusionary sentiments being put forward by extremists on any given political side. To that end, I'm asking the UAC to produce a resolution stating our stance in support of DEI at all levels of education. Okay. We will also share our position with the Board of Regents on February 9th when we give the Academic Faculties Council report. And I encourage you all to join in and watch the ABOR live stream. You know, you can all access it through the Regents website, okay? Okay, now we'll lift up a little bit. Now moving on, this month we honor Senator Shauna Grant. Shauna Grant joined ASU first as a graduate student, continuing the Sun Devil tradition in her family. She has been a faculty member in the College of Health Solutions at ASU for the past 8 years. Prior to joining ASU, she worked as a clinical dietitian in acute care settings in the metropolitan Phoenix area. She has taught a variety of nutrition courses over the years, but specializes in medical nutrition therapy. One of Shauna's goals is to provide learning opportunities that simulate clinical settings, including working with other members of the interdisciplinary healthcare team. She believes in the power of learning from one's mistakes and aims to create a classroom setting where students feel safe to make mistakes and see them as positive opportunity to strengthen their clinical critical thinking skills. Please learn more about Shauna by visiting our Senate dashboard blog, as I know you all do every week, right? Later on in this session, we're going to talk about our upcoming elections. We need help from all of you in promoting participation in this process of shared governance. You will have the opportunity to nominate people, and then your whole units or schools will have the opportunity to vote. Okay, so really, really important. And also remember, we have one of the best events of the year at ASU. We have our Spring Academic Assembly. Okay, reception is next week, February 7th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Michael Crow will be addressing the group, or ASU. Registration is required. Please RSVP by February 6th. The link was sent for you to register. It was sent today at 1 p.m. And here's the subject line you can search for: Spring Academic Assembly Reception Invitation. Okay? Hey, we all get a lot of emails, but it's important to look. Now, I would like to give the floor to our Executive Vice President and University Provost Nancy Gonzalez. Please note, Provost Gonzalez is often double and triple booked. It amazes me. And she has to depart by about 3:30. So just preemptively. Okay. Provost Gonzalez.
Thank you. And I have got a
golf cart waiting right outside for me because I cannot be late to a 3:45 site visit. Anyway, I also want to say Happy New Year and welcome. I hope your year is off to a good start. 2023 has certainly kicked off with a flurry of activity in many, many realms for us at ASU. I want to just mention a couple. With the new administration moving into the governor's office, there's a focus on setting new priorities. With new budget appropriations at both the federal and state level, we're very actively, including between Christmas and New Year, looking to see what changes are coming up so that we are well poised to take advantage of many, many opportunities. For example, we're currently working on a microelectronics network proposal. I can hear myself. It will be the first of the CHIPS opportunities that are part of the $52 billion appropriated from the Department of Commerce. We also are, we just submitted an NSF Engines proposal on sustainability. That'll be another $160 million potential grant for us. We're waiting for final word on our complex free electron laser proposal that was submitted at $90 million. And we have several other large grants that in site visits that are coming. In fact, I need to leave here because we're a finalist now for a National Institute of Theory in Math and Biology, which is another $46 million grant that we're hoping to land. And I've got to lead the site visit meeting at 3:45. So a lot of activity in the research space, but also more and more we're being called to step forward to try to be of help to the state. For example, over the break, we were awarded $40 million to try to be part of the solution to the water problem in the state. Very, very important for all of us, and great to see that investment in the future of Arizona. We're also being asked to think hard about the future of healthcare in the state and what role we can play, not just us, but all three universities. So I know this past year, there's a lot of focus on the new economy and microelectronics and semiconductors, et cetera. I'm predicting the next year, you're going to hear a lot about health. And we're also being asked to really step up and figure out how we will educate more Arizonans, and the Board of Regents and the state is really asking us to think about how we can encourage more college going in partnership with K-12, in partnership with other leading educators and including ed tech. And I'm going to feature one in just a minute. So we're really putting an extra focus and lens on what we can do for the state to lift up educational attainment in the state, which has always been behind most other major metropolitan areas. And as we see the changes that I just talked about with the economic changes so focused on very highly skilled labor, we're sort of going to kind of come at a crossroads where we're really ill prepared if we're not trying to really rethink how we do things. So on that point, YouTube just in partnership with Arizona State University just launched what they're calling Crash Course, which is a channel that by Study Hall, which is basically going to be available on YouTube to learners all across the country and internationally as well, to help learners understand what it takes to get into college. And we've also developed through Learning Enterprise under the leadership of Maria Anguiano, we've developed courses that students can take in our earned admissions kind of framework that they can gain entry into the university. Very big high level launch this week. We've been in the news all over the place. This is from NBC. And we've already gotten 350,000 hits on YouTube, and we have several people already enrolling in the courses. So once again, trying to find innovative ways to provide pathways and increase college going for students who wouldn't ordinarily necessarily seek these opportunities. So as you can see, a lot going on in many directions. Now, it's not just technology. We're also really trying to do what we can to increase college going and increase the number of Arizonans that we are educating in our immersion courses. And we see some of the developments that we're trying to push in the Poly campus and also West Campus as being key to this. We've got 6 new colleges proposed at the same meeting that Penny mentioned earlier for ABOR approval in February, and that'll be coming to you for your input as well. We see this again as being very important for positioning us to serve the state and meet these needs that I'm talking about that are complicated, but we uniquely have a role to play. I want to just step back and say in all of this that we've discussed, whether it's the research, whether it's the educational mission, or even the high-tech learning enterprise efforts, our faculty have been at the center of all of this work. So again, thank you for the work that you do. I also want to just spend a little bit of time, first of all, thanking you for the role that you play in faculty governance and for your thoughtful way that you bring ideas and concerns forward for us to consider. I definitely thank the Senate. It was the Senate's letter actually that I received before I even stepped into this office outlining concerns that was responsible for us eventually moving to a higher percentage of faculty who will now have opportunities to have multi-year contracts. Some of the promotion opportunities that we're giving career track faculty, the changing from a non-tenure eligible to career track faculty, and the changing of titles from lecturers to teaching professors. All of that really came out of your thoughtful and productive way that you're offering information for us to consider. For me, it's very important that I hear that, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate that. And so on that note, I know that an issue of big concern and a lot of discussion is the recent merit increases that happened at ASU. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on that. I'm just watching my clock here. So there are a couple of reasons why there's such a focus on the merit increases. I think there's just been a focus on salary and inflation. Basically, this past year, we've experienced out of control inflation that has made it really difficult for families to make ends meet and has been stressful for everybody. Because of that, we implemented some living wage adjustments, which are basically the only time that we do an across the board salary increase is when we're lifting up minimum wages at the bottom level. We did this for career track faculty, specifically instructional faculty, had a big impact primarily on instructional faculty who were quite frankly underpaid in very significant ways. So we were able to correct that and get them up beyond at the living wage. We did this for TA and RAs, graduate TA and RAs, and we did this also for hourly employees on the staff. So living wage adjustment happened last May, and it did respond. It was responding to inflation, which at last year was up close to 9 and 10%. It has since come down. It's at about 6.5%, and predictions are it's going to continue to come down as kind of wages stabilize, as supply chain also adjusts, and a lot of this was caused by all the changes that were happening as we came back from the pandemic. So those living wage adjustments happened, but it also, as you know, caused compression. And compression is when some people get raises, or compression is actually a perpetual problem at institutions of higher education. It's a perpetual problem in most businesses, but it's particularly a problem at universities because market forces change. The nature of pricing that you need to bring people into the university. So you're hiring people in at a higher level, or you make other adjustments related to, in this case, living wage or related to retentions. And then what can happen is that people who've been here for a longer time, sometimes in higher positions, are now compressed so that the differentiation between ranks starts to diminish. And in some cases, you also get inversion, where you get people at higher ranks who are actually making less than people at lower ranks. And so we're always needing to correct what that compression. Now, we don't do it through across the board raises. That's not the policy of ASU. It's also not the ABOR approved policy for salary adjustments. But what we try to do is we try to address those compression issues in our merit exercise, which is separate from a living wage adjustment. So we just did a merit exercise this fall before the term ended, and new salaries kicked in January of 2023. So I just want to outline so that you understand what guides the way we do merit raises. So let's see. Can we back up a bit to the second slide? Okay, so here's the university policy on salary adjustments. This is outlined in the ACD 51101. Basically, Arizona State University operates within a board-approved salary adjustment plan. That's the merit exercise that provides for rewarding employees in recognition of satisfactory and above satisfactory performance, and provides for a process by which other salary adjustment considerations are resolved. So at base level, 10 minutes, okay. At base level, it is a merit exercise. It's not, and so we look to see we look to see what we get on the annual review to help us decide how to make those adjustments. So the annual review, and I know some people get frustrated with the annual review, it's very important because this is our way of evaluating faculty to make determinations about how we're going to parse out the available funds for merit raises every year. If we get merit raises, some years we don't have merit raises. So we look at the annual review, and that is used to decide merit raises. So as you also see, external market forces outside the control of any institute result in different minimum salaries needed to attract and retain faculty. So this is what I was talking about. Sometimes, and we've seen this especially in high-tech fields, you can't hire people into certain positions because they can make too much money going to Facebook and Google and to other places. So it kind of increases salary in some categories relative to other categories. So you start to get this unevenness across salaries. But just at base, so you know, the merit exercise that we did was based on merit as a beginning point. So let's go to the next slide. So beyond issues related to merit, we also use this salary adjustment period to look at compression and inversion. And in any given year, we set priorities about how we're going to address those. When I knew that we were giving a living wage adjustment in May, which I absolutely stand by, was the right thing to do because it was unconscionable to be paying people at the low salaries that we make, knowing they and instructional faculty teach more than anybody, knowing that they couldn't go out and get other jobs if they were trying to meet their demands. It was not the right thing to do. But knowing that we were going to have compression as a result, I worked very closely with the deans all fall to say, let's use what you can to take care of compression. And they did that by using their merit allocation, and a lot of colleges, particularly those that have more ability to do so, added even more into the merit exercise to be able to deal with compression. So our priorities were, first of all, correct the salaries of faculty at the lower earning ends of the spectrum. That was the first thing that happened in May. Then reward and retain high-performing faculty through merit adjustments. So we're not going to ignore the annual review. We're going to use the annual review to set merit levels, but then consider where possible, and with the availability of funds, adjustment for faculty facing compression and take corrective actions. And so every dean sort of looked at what they had to try to make those adjustments. So let's go to the next slide. So now, one of the things I just want to make clear is this is what we did this year. ACD also has provisions that say you might have different priorities year after year. So performance funds, often referred to as merit pay, are distributed and administered consistent with principles and guidelines issued by the president of the university and in each iteration of funding made available. Other salary adjustments, therefore, might have different goals one year after the other. The president of the university decides on the allocation of funds. And so this year we were trying to look at compression and looking at the most egregious examples of compression. Now, let me say a couple of things about compression and these adjustments. They cannot be resolved ever in a single year. Dealing with compression is a multi-year process at best. For example, the raises that we gave to TARAs were made on a 3-year basis. We said across 3 years, we're going to try to get you up to the living wage. It's also the case that they're never resolved, even if you could infuse more money and satisfy everybody. It's always going to be reappearing as new market forces come into play. So it's something that we're constantly revisiting and trying to deal with. And so we made adjustments that we could this year. This next coming year, we will look at it again, and we're constantly looking at compression and trying to figure out ways to deal with it within the bounds of it's a merit exercise. The other thing is that all units will do this in a different way because our units have very different makeup. So when we look at across our college, for example, we have colleges that don't have any instructional faculty. We have colleges that have an overwhelming number of instructional faculty. We have some colleges that actually don't have teaching professors. So the balance in the mix is very, very different. And some of our colleges, for example, had no impact at all from the living wage adjustment and had very few faculty who got that living wage adjustment. So there's a tremendous variation across colleges. So I know there's a wish to kind of come up with one solution for all colleges. They're just too different to be able to do that. And likewise, salary differences are quite enormous across the two colleges based on market demands. So entirely formulaic approaches are not going to solve the problem. And I also just want to reiterate that we impose multiple levels of oversight. I think there's a concern that there's just like one person making all these decisions. Faculty evaluations are done by the faculty. They come forward usually through directors who make the first pass at merit allocation. It comes to the dean who reviews it, sometimes sends it back, wants corrections. It comes up to the provost's office. We review it. There are always multiple eyes on the process. So just to not lead the impression that that this is being done just by one person or very few. In fact, every time we're doing any kind of salary adjustment, and we get a lot of these in the provost's office throughout the year because we're all constantly trying to retain faculty, the first thing we ask is, let's look at the comps. Let's look to see other people in this category, what are they making? Because we don't want to retain people and give salaries that are going to be out of line because it causes, again, too many problems with compression. So it's a constant focus for us in trying to deal with the complexity of what we're doing at ASU, where we're trying to go after huge grants, as I said before, where we're trying to teach large numbers of students at scale. The complexities are really, really great. And so it does take focus from many, many people who really do have your best interests at heart. And I know, not everybody gets what they hoped for, but the process is quite robust. So I just want to say before I have to leave that I was quite pleased with on balance, the way things looked across our colleges. So there are questions about, well, if you were really dealing with compression, what might that look like? And overall, I think what how it looks is that the merit exercise that happened in the fall, instructors had much lower levels of increases because they were already corrected. So we saw about a 1.9% on average increase among instructional faculty through the merit exercise. Assistant teaching professors had on average a 4.2% increase. Now, again, a lot of range. Some colleges were able to pour more money in. And again, merit is part of the process. And associate teaching professors on average had a 6.3% increase. And teaching professors on average had a 6.6% increase. So you do see this gradation of greater correction happening at the higher levels, much less happening at the instructional level who had benefited earlier before. All in all, there are nearly 1,000 people as part of this. So, we have the data to look at that, and, we're looking at lots of other things to see how do we look in terms of equity with respect to gender and other issues. So we dive into the data, but overall, I do think that the deans implemented something that was getting at compression, and we're going to continue to do so year after year. So I am sorry I can't take questions because I have to leave. Maybe.
Go with it.
Thank you so much, Provost Gonzalez. Thank you. And trust me, she is booked like crazy. Okay. Thank you very much. And by the way, give a little shout out for this YouTube partnership. My 26-year-old daughter, who knows nothing about these meetings, just said, "Hey, I just saw YouTube and ASU are partnering. One of my guys I follow." So we're out there. They're aware of it. It's pretty cool. All right, next we're going to have.
Wait, can we have a question?
Oh, of course, Dave.
Thank you. So I'm glad that the merit-based survey that I conducted was able to actually lead to the provost talking to us about this. We've never had such a conversation, even though it was one way. I want to point out the pronoun "we" that was used repeatedly did not include us outside of the faculty annual review process you might be involved in. It's really when I ran for the Tempe Union Governing Board in 2010 and 2012. I didn't win, which actually turned out to be a good thing. But in 2013, I was put on as one of two community members on the Budget Advisory Committee for Tempe Union High School District, and I served in that capacity for 8 years. When I first was put on there, I had 3 kids in the high school. What was really, and what I would like to see ASU do, and I think Maury College has been talking about this, and you're going to get an RFC related to this, is the idea that we need to have a much more inclusive process about this. This shouldn't be closed door rooms with deans and so forth. There are maybe fundamental inequities in the way colleges are financed, and there should be real stakeholder processes. So this committee included not only community members, but it included certified employees, which are teachers, including the representative from the union, classified folks, which included essentially the people who are not teachers, included administrators. It was a very good, and we would listen and talk, and we would think about what's the potential added money that we've got, and how is the most fair and possible way that we can do it. And I mean, it's less of a kind of privileged meritocracy at the union, high school union district, as opposed to the way ASU prefers to conduct itself. But the point is, if we had questions, they would be researched and brought back to us. And we should have much more of that at a public university like ASU. And what I would like to see is every college have a committee like that, and at the provost level also have something like that. So I would hope that the provost office would be really eager to engage that process, so we can have a more open and honest and transparent thing, so that when people get raises, and I was glad to get a universal thing about that today, but I just hope that issue will become a top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Of course, we are a different scale than Tempe Union, but we are very aware of this. And I think your question is, can we create more transparency with the process? And just so you know, the UAC has been talking about this, and we're going to set up a task force to address how do we develop more transparency between processes. Well, financial, yes, well, money. But we are working on that. So if that is your question, it is actually in progress, and we appreciate all the work you've done to bring light to this.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So Deb, you got the question done? Okay. All right. Yes, yes. So, sorry, I'm present here, guys, but I know you're all there. Okay, so do we have any questions from downtown?
No questions from downtown.
All right, thanks, Maureen. Scotty Craig, President Craig, do you have any questions from Polytechnic?
There any questions at Polytechnic campus?
Okay, and that last but certainly not least, West Campus. Are there any questions?
Questions from West Campus, thank you.
No questions.
Okay, and like I said, we are trying to address this transparency issue. There are systemic challenges to some of the things that are being asked, and we will try our best to get these resolved. Okay, next, we are delighted to have Lance Harrop, the Associate Vice President of EOS and the Dean of Students in Tempe, and I worked with him when he was Poly, and Alicia Wackerly Painter, the Director, Access and Student Support. And this is in response to all of you wanting more information on how does sales actually work, make determinations of a student's needs, how do they support us? And I felt that it was important from your comments that we all had a better understanding of exactly what they do, so that our only interaction isn't just that email that says so-and-so needs double test time. Okay, so with that, why don't you guys come on up?
All right, thank you all, and good afternoon.
Oh, yeah, I'm short.
All right, is that better? All right, good afternoon. My name is, as noted, I'm Lance Harrop, Associate Vice President, Dean of Students at the Tempe campus. I've been most recently, I was at the Polytechnic campus, the Dean of Students for the last 8 years. I've been at the university for the past 27 years. And today, grateful for the invitation. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is just our services. We know that there have been questions related to the process. When we receive information from students that have identified themselves as having a need, an accessibility need, what does that look like? And how do we go through that process and helping you all to ensure access for your classes? I will acknowledge at the beginning of all this, this is difficult work. And quite honestly, it's become that much more difficult as we think about accessibility laws and mandates and the bar for which becoming a person with a disability has actually been lowered. So many of you may not know this. So with the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, there was a lot of confusion around what is determined to be a disability. What are the conditions that qualify as a disability? The information that we look at, and we'll go through this process a little bit, but the information that we look at and that we really rely on each of you in informing us how it impacts your classes and the way the students are interacting with the curriculum and with each other is really the impact of that disability, which is most critical for us. It's less about the diagnosis. It's more about how are they learning? How are they interacting? How are they processing information and all of that? So, and you'll see a little bit of a flavor of that as we go through some of this today. But most importantly, and I hope the takeaway from all of this, from this conversation today is, A, how do we improve this process and work with each of you collaboratively? That's what is the most important part of understanding how supporting students with disabilities relates to your classes and to the curriculum. We know that there are accommodations that are probably not appropriate for your classes. So having that information communicated back to us, it's okay. So, and we always appreciate the accommodation that was recommended is this, but it doesn't work for these reasons. We always appreciate that information and the informative part of all of this. But I do want to acknowledge that we're also evolving. We're also changing. Just as the university is changing, we are seeing a greater number of students that we're serving. Not all of our students that we serve qualify for accommodations, but they do qualify for support. It could be through student accessibility, could be through the Dean of Students office, it could be through counseling and health services and the many resources that we have available. So we also serve as a hub in connecting those students to those many resources. Currently, we serve about 10,000 students. And we know statistically that universities across the country have about 15 to 20% of their total population of identified as having a disability. So that 10,000, we know that there are many more students that are at the university that have a disability and just either haven't identified themselves as having a disability or even better. So, and this is a testament to each of you and how you're implementing the curriculum as well. For each of the classes, if the courses are already accessible, there's really no need for them to request those accommodations. So, and that's also true. We know that there are many students out there that don't need accommodations because the courses are already accessible. So we want to acknowledge that as well. So what we would like to talk about today is just give a brief introduction of our services, what we do, and more specifically, just focus on when a student walks into our office and identify themselves as having a disability, what does that look like? Here's the distinction that is really important in terms of higher education versus high school. In high school, the high school and those that are supporting students, they're responsible for identifying students with disabilities. So as a teacher, they might raise their hand and say, I have a student in my class who's really struggling with processing speed or memorization or testing. So they will identify that student and then go through the process of evaluation and providing documentation to support that student. When students matriculate to the university, it then becomes their responsibility to identify themselves to our office. And this is a really important aspect. Many of our students, they don't know that. So we communicate this out to as many students as we can, that when you're here, if you are a person with a disability, raise your hand. Let us know who you are and how you're being impacted in your classes so that we can best support you and connect to those resources. We do want to talk a little bit about the eligibility review and documentation process. This is important. It's important that you know that and every student that walks in our door, some of them may not qualify for services, and we let them know that. Some of them might qualify for a particular accommodation, but for not another accommodation. And Alicia will talk through what that process looks like on her team whenever we get that documentation. A really important part of this, as we noted before, is the interactive piece. So the communication that you give us as it relates to each of your classes, fundamental. It is critically important that if there is an accommodation that is either being recommended or that the student is asking for, and keep in mind, there might be accommodations that come to you that may not have come through us. So a student might come to you directly and say, hey, I need flexible attendance, or I need flexible whatever. That may not be an accommodation that we would approve. Let us know that so that we can go back and verify through the documentation whether or not that's an appropriate accommodation, whether or not that ensures access, or if it's just a benefit. There is a distinction about that, is that while we want all students to be successful, for us, it's about accessibility. We have to ensure that the courses and the environment are accessible. And then the other piece is if in providing those accommodation fundamentally alters the curriculum and what you're hoping the students will learn as part of that, also let us know that. So for example, one of the examples that we sometimes will get is flexible attendance. So students that may have medical conditions that will flare up and they're unable to attend classes. In some cases, in some classes, that might be an appropriate accommodation. In other classes, where being in the class and being part of a process through communication and discussion and lecture, you might have a guest speaker that comes in that day. You can't make that information, you can't just get that information anywhere. So that may be a fundamental alteration of the way that the curriculum is designed. We get that, we understand that. Let us know that so that we can then go back and evaluate if there are other accommodations or other means that we can provide access for those classes. We also want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing, especially in higher education. These are the same trends that each of you are seeing in supporting students with disabilities. And then we also want to make sure that you have enough time to let us know the questions and concerns that you have. So with that, provides just not sure where I'm pointing. Maria, you got me? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk through what are the mandates that as a university that we're required to follow. And when we're determining whether or not a person is a person with a disability. One area that I want to know, and this is an area that came up recently with one of our students, is while we are legally mandated to ensure that the university is accessible, again, one of the ways that we do that is through the provision of accommodations, but it may not be the accommodation that we typically think of. Qualifying as a person with a disability is a very low threshold, and lawmakers have made it that way very intentionally. When the ADA was first established, it became a little bit exclusive, where the discussion then became, well, you don't qualify as a person with a disability or for the various reasons. Lawmakers came back in 2008 and amended the Americans with Disabilities Act to actually lower the threshold for qualifying as a disability. Here's what is critical in all that, as noted before, is that while somebody might qualify because of that low threshold, they may not qualify for an accommodation. So, and therein lies the right side of this, which I'll let Alicia take over, is the guidance that we follow from professional organizations and from state lawmakers, and then ultimately from each of you and informing us on this.
Now come back to shorter person standard. So as Lance noted, we included some information about the major life activities under the ADA guidance, right? So that's really when sort of the rubber meets the road, right? Where are the functional limitations? What are the major life activities that are impacted by that student's disability? And so through the Association of Higher Education and Disability, they've been very clear and consistent over the years, and we follow their guidelines. And that is to understand what the student self-report is. So what do they say the impact of their disability is? Again, you can line up 10 people with ADHD. We're all going to have a different impact. We're going to see a different set of circumstances. They're all going to use different coping mechanisms, all those things. So the self-report is essential for starting to get that information. We also can rely on observations and interactions. So this is especially important for those students that maybe come to us this semester after they've already been here, and they can say, oh yeah, I interacted in this class in this way, and this is how I struggled, right? This is how I interacted in my K-12 space, and this is where I struggled. And then the disability documentation, of course, is an important part. So every student who registers with us, we do have to understand, what is that diagnosis? How did we get to this point? How did we get to the point where you are qualified as a person with a disability, sort of circling back to that standard under the ADA? We, though, at ASU, and this shouldn't surprise anybody in this room, focus on really getting to know our students. So one of the unique factors that we have at ASU is that all of our students go through an hour-long intake appointment. This is not consistent with other universities, but yet we have one of the highest populations of students with disabilities registered. We meet with everyone one-on-one to get to know them, get to know their impact, get to know their disability, get to know their story. What are they experiencing? And then they can always meet with us later. And I share this with you mostly so you understand that we're not just looking at the documentation and going, okay, they have this, here you go. We really try and get to know the student and who they are and what they experience in order to make our determinations. In the end, it really is a deliberate and collaborative process. And you're going to hear me say the word collaboration multiple times, because ultimately the disability accommodation process as a whole is an interactive process. That is the fundamental nature of it. That is if you take nothing away from any of what we say, it's an interactive process. Hey, look, I said it again. Like I said, it's an interactive process in determining what is a fundamental alteration. So this is where you all are essential. Looking at this room, I couldn't begin to tell you who teaches what class and what your class is like, what your essential components of your class are like. You are the experts in that field. We're the ones who understand the disability, the impact of the disability. You understand your class. We need you to communicate with us if something we're saying is a reasonable accommodation doesn't fit within the scope of your class. This is also the essential process if the Office of Civil Rights, unfortunately, were to have to get involved in a determination. They look at, why did you make that determination of that accommodation? Why did that accommodation not fit in that class? Why did it fundamentally alter? Who made that decision? Why were they qualified to make that decision? Did anybody else weigh in making that decision? So who else is an expert? Did you consult with another, it's a bio class. Did you consult with another biology professor who happens to have an expertise in that class or teaches that class? So they look for consistency. All of those things factor into this interactive process. And we really have to be able to articulate, how did we make the decisions we made collectively? We never want to go into any situation where it's an us versus you situation. We want to go at it together to find something that's a reasonable alternative. And that's where our letters, you will always see a name in those letters as always the best person to reach out to. And if you don't see a name, I am the next best person to reach out to. And you can always email me and say, I don't know what to do in the situation. I'm confused. I don't think this accommodation is going to work. You can email me. You can email Chad sitting there. You can email Lance if you'd like to. You can email any of us and get a hold of us to have that conversation, but there's always a name in that letter. So I will always encourage you to start there because that person knows that student better than any of us. And then trends. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is trends in how our students are interacting with us as a whole. And so one of the things we point out here is there are some challenges with the processes. So as Lance mentioned, in K-12 space, students are sort of walked through the accommodation process. Their parents are there. They go through that process very collectively, and now they're kind of thrown out there to do it on their own. And some struggle with that. Some don't maybe hear everything we have to say, maybe don't check their email and see the steps or instructions. Certain things like that can be problematic because then they may come to you and say, oh, well, student accessibility said X, Y, and Z. And you're like, what did they say? That doesn't seem right. And it might not be. I mean, it's an unfortunate trend that we're seeing these days. The understanding of accessibility and what it means, that is also a trend we are seeing. Some students understand the concept of accessibility and others want us to just review the documentation and approve whatever they ask for and then go to your class and you give it to them without question, and don't really have a good grasp on that interactive process, that fundamental alteration component. So that's something we're working to educate our students on and we're spending a lot of time on. Unique requests. So this is especially impactful for you all. The amount of remote learning requests due to a disability related need. This is something we never would have seen before the pandemic. We wouldn't have even entertained it. But now this is something we have to consider. If it comes across our door, we have to consider, is there a barrier? Is this a reasonable accommodation? It's something we never would have talked about. And with the implementation of new technologies, they're talking about study hall and earned admissions. We're providing accommodations for those classes as well because they're new technology, new opportunities for students, new ways for us to think about accessibility. So anytime you add something new, we also have to think about the accessibility component that goes with it. Propensity to escalate. We have seen this in our students lately. I mentioned OCR in the last slide because we have seen our students sort of escalating concerns a little bit more frequently than maybe they used to a couple years ago. And so this is something we are keeping our eye on. But that is the reason I mention it is because we're here to support. We always want you to come to us if you feel like something like that is happening with your student related to their accommodations, because oftentimes it's a misunderstanding. It's just a misunderstanding where somebody said something, misunderstood it, somebody else said something back, and we can bring it together because we're always here to support throughout this process. And then large numbers. I don't think I need to really elaborate on that very much, but we know your class sizes are large, just like our student numbers are large. So we know that providing individual accommodations in your classes can be challenging because you have a lot of students. And then you start getting unique and individualized needs. We get that. It sort of comes with the territory. It's what we have to do to ensure that our students, their needs are met and that we as an institution are ensuring students have accessibility in their classes. But we understand it. We are seeing it as well. So we are here to support as best we can. We try and improve our processes all the time to help sort of adjust with that volume adjustment. And so we're always open to suggestions, should you have any, for how we can continue to meet that robust need. All right. And then we have time for questions and hopefully answers.
If it's okay, I would like to lead off. Does anybody though have questions in Tempe? You want to start? Sorry, alphabetical. Sorry, downtown. Do you have any questions?
No questions from downtown. Thank you.
Okay. Then we're gonna have Polytechnic Campus. Scotty?
There are no questions from the Polytechnic campus.
And now we're at Tempe and we do have questions. Can I just real quick, and it may be something you're going to ask. Can we, number one, dispute or adjust an accommodation your office has made? Two, will we ever have the opportunity to have more support sent to the classroom to help, services? So I don't know if that's part of it. It's not. Okay. Okay, good. Then you can ask it and I'm gonna step back, but hold on. Go ahead. Yes, please.
I'm Melissa Button from School of Art. And I would say that there are definitely some issues around making and School of Art spaces that we have run into some difficulties in trying to provide the accommodations. And we also have a lot of grad students who teach, and we're in spaces that may not be technologically, set up for some of the things you guys ask us to do. And then it lands on them as graduate students to try to figure these things out in the classroom. And I'm just wondering, what kind of things are you guys willing to bring inside that classroom space to take that pressure off of the teacher to do all these really fancy little things in a space that's about making and demonstrations that require, your attention for an entire classroom, and then to then go to the side and try to teach almost an entirely separate type of class to make the accommodation. And I know that, we've just had some issues and maybe not the support in the classroom space that seems like a reasonable ask.
So the unfortunate short answer to your question is it depends. So there's different levels of what support might need to be provided, right? So is it a student who has a limitation with grabbing materials, with getting things out and placing things on their desk, navigating the classroom, and little things that come in with that? Yeah, there are accommodations that could address it. Is it sort of what I also heard, part of the teaching aspect of that we would be more limited because we're not experts in that.
Right. Well,
but
specifically, we had an issue with a hearing impaired student. And so they asked us to, set up Zoom, record it, get the subtitles going, and do all of this, but then also somehow be mic'd in a classroom that you have to move around, when it would have just been easier to have had somebody that could help provide that accommodation and translate, help the student, and even a computer to set up in Zoom and make sure. So there was just all these things. And this is one of many. I supervise all of our graduate students. So I feel like I'm at the intersection of a lot of these moments where it's just really complicated. And I'm just wondering what kind of resources either maybe you aren't being provided on your end to then send to our classroom spaces that would be helpful, or should we be asking for more things?
So one of the things I thought of when you were speaking is, one thing, Chad is luckily taking notes, and I saw him writing feverishly. He oversees our deaf and hard of hearing. So that was great feedback for us, is also, do we know that's a challenge? So when we know that there's issues with getting things set up, or technology, just using the specific example, we can absolutely arrange for support in that space. And how can we come into the classroom? Can we contact IT to come into the classroom and help get that stuff set up? And so I think that's part of, I'm not saying in this situation if we knew or didn't know, but making sure we know is really important. And if you don't get that answer, making sure you have both myself and Chad's contact information, because we might look into it a little bit further or be able to provide a different level of support. So I appreciate that example because it helps us sort of think through what you're sharing with us.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but it's just communication. Please let us know.
Right. And I will just make sure to push a little harder because sometimes we get like, we'll do this and do this. And it's like, but we're telling you because we can't do those things. And so I think, and again, I think a lot of times when it's graduate students, you know, they are not sure of what they need to do. And I just want to know what the support is that I can offer them and what my role can be to, you know, help facilitate those things. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So one thing that I will ask that, we always appreciate the pushback as well. There are also elements related to technology that may be the responsibility of the student the same way that they would be for any other student. So there might be personal equipment that they might need to purchase or bring in. We can also help navigate any and all of that, both in terms of our conversations with the students, but also in evaluating the environment in the class. You noted the college that you're in right now. That's complex beyond. I mean, you know that better than anybody in terms of ensuring accessibility for that environment. We can for sure help navigate all of that. And again, it may not necessarily be the accommodation that the student is their preference. It might be a different accommodation. The end goal is just accessibility for the environment. But it's ensuring that you as the instructor don't have to necessarily change the environment per se. It's an integration accessibility within that environment.
I'm Gilberto Lopez, School Transport Studies. So mine's half question, half concern as someone who went through the process of when I was in graduate school. It was not very late in my life that I found out I needed help to learn statistics, and I was diagnosed with a disability. I found it a very dehumanizing process. It's some conversation that we never had in our community ever. I had no idea until grad school that there were services available for us to help us succeed. So I'm a little concerned. One is the gatekeepers who sign off and say, yes, this student has a disability, this student doesn't. Those are not unbiased individuals. And you know, there's literature out there that says who gets put on what tracks and the power these individuals have. So a lot of our students, especially in school transport studies, we have a lot of first-gen students, students of color. What are we doing as an institution to make sure that these individuals who were never were aware that there's these services there? How could we present this at institution, not just each individual professor as an institution, to make sure that they know that there's support and it's not put on them saying, you know, you're not doing well because it's a personal failure on your part. It's something else going on. That's one question. The other question is more also structural. How can we be more proactive as someone who lives in this world in a larger body? Sometimes the space that we live in is not designed for larger bodies. People with larger bodies are not always, you know, labeled with disabilities. And I'm thinking the chairs, these flimsy chairs. How do we get, you know, 30% of society is having a larger body than average? Why don't we have 30% of our chairs designed for that? Why don't we have standing desks in the back of the room that resembles society? Why do we assume that everybody comes to university is fit and tiny? So again, I'm not attacking anybody here. I'm just posing these questions. I think we need to be proactive. And the other one, we need to be aware of these inequities that exist and how do we make these services available to everybody, not just those who've been talking about this since 12K. So it's not really a question. I don't know if there's a question in there somewhere, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I would say the oversimplified response to that is I 100% agree with what you just said on every level. There is an educational element that, especially when serving students with disabilities, that's critical. It's important. It's helping students to understand the services that are available. It's also destigmatizing disability and helping students to integrate within the environments that they are in ways that it doesn't become an additional barrier for their success. All of that is education. All of that is raising awareness. Easier said than done, obviously. To that point, It's also in encouraging the rethinking of the environments that we are currently in. So you noted the chairs. That is a challenge that we are also advancing in ways that the more that we can make our environments more universally designed, regardless of your ability level, your ability to learn, that serves all students, not just students with disabilities, that serves all students. So that therein lies our challenge as a university to continue to design environments in that way, in universally designed ways, so it becomes supportive of all students.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bomarsich. I represent the School of International Letters and Cultures, and I have two questions. The first one's relatively simple. Can you give us a walkthrough of exactly what resources SAILS has to help faculty? And the reason I'm asking this is I got a memo last week of a student who required captions, and the way it was phrased, it sounded like I had to caption them myself. But I know from previous experience that SAILS has a captioning service. So I panicked for a moment thinking it was gone and I was going to have to caption all these videos myself. But could you talk about the sort of services you have on site that faculty could ask for? Because the memo did not address that.
Yeah, so to answer your question specifically, we have in our deaf and hard of hearing department, we have folks that do transcripts and folks that do captions. One of the areas of confusion, and I'll just address it, is given the volume, we can only do it for those classes that have a active request for our purposes. So if you're thinking about universal design, which we totally appreciate, we may be able to give you instructions on how to do that independently, but we may not be able to help. But to your case, we would be able to support the captioning. And to your broader question of what support we do provide, so some of the things that have come up, we have sign language interpreters. We have CART providers that are both on-site and remote. We have, like I said, a whole team that does alternative media conversions. So in addition to what you see in Learning Ally and Canvas, which is an amazing tool, we have an entire team that works to convert textbooks and reading materials to an accessible format should a student need that. We have a wide range of student employees that do various things, from answering our phones and answering questions and can answer basic questions for faculty to proctoring exams and serving in that capacity. We administer exams. So you don't have to be in the classroom for 1.5 times or 2.0 times. We have testing sites at all 4 of our locations. So you all don't have to worry about the administration of those accommodations. We also have access to a number of assistive technologies that actually are accessible to you as faculty, because we've gotten you institutional licenses for those. And then the only other thing I can think to add just right off the top of my head is we also have created a number of, and we are still working to create a number of resource guides that we've attached in our faculty notification letters. These are new, and you can click on them and get more robust instructions on how to implement some accommodations, including email templates that you can use with students, and different things like that. And then lastly, we have a Lunch and Learn series that'll be starting up here soon that is geared towards faculty, so you can come and attend whenever you choose, or never if you choose, that you all will have access to learn more about individual topics. So if you want to learn more about deaf and hard of hearing, we should be doing a session on that. If you want to learn more about how testing works, we're going to have a session on that kind of thing. Those are the ones that come to mind right off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, you mentioned student escalation, which I agree is a problem. I think I might be the only person here who can speak about this, but I'm a faculty member, obviously, but I'm also a student. And as a student, I'm registered with SAILS for accommodations. And I don't ask for them in every course, but when I do ask for them, there's a pretty high failure rate of accommodations. It's about 60%. I went and checked. And that might be an extreme outlier. I kind of don't think it is, because of talking with students with disabilities. And also I pretty much have the same failure rate when I ask for accommodations as an employee, which is a different story. But I guess what I'm asking is, I don't really blame them for escalating, because to me, if I take a course, it's optional. I don't need that course. It's just frustrating not to get an accommodation that you need and have requested through the proper channels. But for them, It's about their time to degree. It's about requirements for their major. It's about credits for graduation. And I know that the student accessibility groups have also been keeping lists of faculty to avoid. And I don't think that's a good educational atmosphere for students from any type of protected class. And I know I'm just kind of dumping that on you, but surely there's something to be done that can sort of engage both faculty and students more in ownership of the process. So that is not really a question, but I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think I just want to clarify, when I bring up the student escalation piece, the reason I bring that up is more the commonality that has come around with it. And what we've seen is when it happens, people can sort of react in a knee-jerk kind of way. But when you realize it's becoming a more common thing, we can work collaboratively to address it. Because to your point, the escalation maybe and typically is directly tied to something. And so I think I bring it up in our presentation more to reference that this is becoming a norm and communicating with us and maybe having that dialogue before we stress about it, and trying to find a resolution collaboratively is more my intention. And so, but I agree, it can help us understand our gaps, because maybe we didn't know that situation was occurring until that student sort of presented it to somebody outside of us. And so it can be very helpful in educating us on our own gaps. So I agree with that.
I'll make this kind of quick. Tom Sharp, School of Earth and Space Exploration. So you've kind of answered most of mine already, but I just want to make the comment that I want to thank you for providing this information, because for me, it's always been that I get the emails and I do the best I can to accommodate. I didn't know that I could communicate with you and get more information. I've always wondered, could I do a better job if I knew a little bit more about the student, but I figured that was a privacy issue that I couldn't find out about. But it's nice to know that there is a chance for us to engage more with you and possibly do a better job of handling these things.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we always say, don't ask the student about their disability, obviously. But you can ask, how does it impact you? Is there something about your accommodations that maybe I could learn more about? You can ask those questions. So yeah, and we are always here to navigate that with you.
Oh, this is the last question.
I think it will be quick. Thank you. I'm Whitney Hansen from Psychology. You mentioned you serve about 10,000 students. How many staff do you have that are facing both students and faculty? Are you understaffed?
Well, we have about 14 to 15 accessibility consultants. So those are the staff that are doing the intake appointments and determining accommodations, communicating with you all that you're receiving notices from. And then we have when you start to include our services team, we have over 35 staff. So I'll say that.
But you don't want to put it on the record that you're understaffed.
Would we take more staff? Yes.
Okay, great.
I want to go over to Wes now. Does Wes have any questions?
Mary has a question.
We have one question.
Please.
So in the last question session, I unfortunately can't remember her name, but she mentioned that there was a high failure rate in students getting the accommodations they request. And I wanted to know exactly what that means. How can that fail? Is that because the faculty member refuses to implement it, or because sales doesn't notice it, or what? That just seems very surprising. Did anybody hear me?
She's coming.
If you're asking me for clarification, it means the faculty member did not implement the accommodations. Other people had to get involved, sales, to make them be implemented.
Okay, so
So yes, they were received after a struggle. Let me put it that way.
Okay, all right. So that's the faculty then that were not cooperating, not that sales somehow was not doing what they're supposed to do. Okay.
I have a question. This is Barry Moon from Interdisciplinary Arts and Performance. On the interactivity side of things, well, first I want to say that you're doing a great job, because otherwise I'd expect to hear a lot of complaints coming back that people aren't satisfied, which is so tick the box of yay. But yeah, when I get the emails that they're from a do not reply email address, and the only reason I was tempted to respond to one was because I received a second notification. I was kind of like, well, have I not done what I'm supposed to do? That's my question.
It could, so we use a database, and sometimes our database is fun. And sometimes it could be a glitch that we accidentally click the button twice. It could be that we sometimes get the student will come to us and say, my professor never received it. And we're like, are you sure? And they're like, yes, but can you send it again? And so we send it again, just because that's what we do. And so it could be a number of things. And our database is amazing. I never want it to go away, because I never want to go back to paper, for those of you who remember gold sheets. But it can be a little glitchy. So odds are it was probably just a duplication or us sending it again because the student asked us to.
Thank you.
This is
Oh, the do not reply part of those emails is because if you hit reply to that email, it goes into our general Salesforce inbox, not to the access consultant that sent it. So again, another kind of database management kind of thing is it goes into our Salesforce, and it's going to take longer for you to get a response, because then it has to get routed and then rerouted. Yep, there's a name in there. Yep. If you reply to it, nothing bad will happen. I'll say that. It'll get there eventually.
I think we have
Okay.
a question.
What?
Came from the mathematics MNS. I just have a question. Do we have any data about the retention rate of the students with documented disabilities? Is that, for me, the program succeeds both at your level and the faculty level if the students who we are serving are really graduating? Do we have any data at all? How many of our students who are documented with a disability do graduate from ASU? Thank you.
So we do have data. Right now, our graduation rate, based on the information that we have, is about 60%. For those that will start and graduate, students with disabilities are, it's complex. So following that data is probably not completely accurate because of the complexity that's involved with ensuring access and the requirements that we have as an institution, and the thresholds that we have to meet in order to meet that retention data. But for those students that we're tracking who are in our database, it's about 60%, not where we want it to be.
But thank you.
Okay, is there any questions from online?
Yes, we have 3 questions. Senator Chamberlain, can you unmute?
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I was wondering, some of the accommodations are really clear. So for example, if I get that a student needs, double time for an exam, that's really clear for me to implement. But then other accommodations are very unclear. For example, my least favorite accommodation is flexible deadlines. And I'm not sure what that means and how the student interprets that. I'm not sure how I should interpret that. And I would assume that there's a lot of variability given the individualized needs of that particular student. And so I guess my question is, for some of these accommodations that are a little more vague, is there the ability to get more clarity on what that should be? So my assumption when I get flexible deadlines is that the student will meet the deadline and that they should be in communication with me to tell me that they can't meet the deadline. But then the student might ask me might assume that they just have flexibility built in. And then suddenly, I'm grading the first half of the semester at the end of the semester, for example. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there's more clarity to that policy in particular, or some of the other policies that I get or accommodations I get that are more vague in nature. Thank you.
And it's a great question and a common one. And we use the language of flexible assignment deadlines and flexible attendance for those of you in person very intentionally, because each disability could impact students differently, right? A student who ends up in the hospital for 3 days might be different than a student who has a seizure and just needs an extra 24 hours, right? So there's an intentionality behind that. However, the resource I will point you to is actually the faculty agreements. So we have active in our system, and students are aware and given instructions on how to do these, and you are more than welcome to prompt them to do these. But they are faculty agreements that the intention is for the student to be able to explain to you how they intend to utilize their flexibility. And this will help not talk about their disability, not talk about anything related to their diagnosis, but asks them to review your syllabus, review your course requirements, and think about how their disability impacts them and how that accommodation should be in your specific course. Then you would get that confirmation as an email, and then that's where our back and forth can happen. I know, especially with ASU Online, that can be especially difficult in those 7-week classes. And that is where we often get a lot of confusion from students. But students are made aware of that from the get-go. They're given the language to use the agreements, but you are also welcome to push them to the agreements. And again, it's just so we can start that interactive process, so we can start that dialogue to understand. I always use the example of discussion boards. If you don't get the discussion board in on time and you were supposed to get feedback, how do you now get feedback and give feedback? You can't. If that's an essential component of the course, maybe that is an assignment of multiple potentially that cannot be granted flexibility because it would fundamentally alter the nature of the assignment. But then you have a term paper or a midterm paper that you're not going to grade within 24 hours. You're going to start grading it in 48 hours. So student turning it in 24 hours late isn't really fundamentally altering how you grade that assignment, right? It's not really a big deal other than that they missed a deadline. But it is on them to communicate that with you. You're not expected to just all of a sudden get all of the assignments and then grade them like if everything's okay. And so what I would say is in the faculty notification letter, as I mentioned, there's a link to a resource guide that actually gives you an email template that we created that you can just copy and paste and send to students, prompting them to complete the agreement. And we're also happy to walk through that. But that's really, we try to include a lot of information when you get those like flexibility type accommodations, because they're all super nuanced to your class and super nuanced to that student.
Hey, Penny, can I just clarify one thing? I was just reminded of something. So getting back to the retention piece, because I think this is a really important piece. It's not uncommon for students with disabilities to leave and then come back, which creates that complexity piece. Chad, last year, our retention for those that were currently enrolled was at 87%.
Okay, last question, Senator Williams, can you please unmute?
Yes, so I'm representing speech and hearing today. And so I understand and appreciate that iterative process, which is really valuable. What we've been finding is that it's a little bit more challenging to work with our clinical accommodations because we're a clinically based program, just in that they differ so much from classroom accommodations. And so that's where that iterative process can come in. However, in many ways, it's been turning into a very faculty program director driven process just because of, I think, maybe the clinical world being different than the classroom environment in any ways. And I was just wondering if you had any suggestions or thoughts on how to better facilitate this process as a whole, both for the sake of the student and the sake of the program, that it doesn't feel like we're reinventing, even though every student's different, we're not reinventing the wheel every time we work through this process for a student.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic question. Clinical experiences, internships, everything like that can be extremely nuanced and difficult. One of the things I recommend, and I will tell this to everybody, and I've said it since the beginning, is develop as many standards of practice that you can possibly have that you're holding all students to. What we often find in the clinical experience is that when students start requesting accommodations that might fundamentally alter, for example, they want to, in the clinical nursing environment, want to go attend the clinical space and reduce number of hours. Well, does that meet the requirements of the clinical nursing board? That's a question, right? And that's a question that's helpful to have outlined in something students receive early on. And so I know in certain clinical placements and clinical experiences, when we've suggested that, that's sort of been a little bit like, oh, I've never thought about what are the essential components of the clinical experience? Are there credentials that you have to meet? Are there certifying boards that have things that you have to consider? And looking through all of those for your programs and what certifications the students are going to come out with, and have the students have something tangible that they can see and review, which also helps us in the interactive process as well, because it helps sort of give foundation to what can be accommodated and what can't. And that tends to guide that process almost every single time when those exist. And when they don't exist, that's when it starts to get tricky, because it's hard to point back to what is essential and what is just a preference of that program. So it's outlining those essential functions of that program. And then that allows us to kind of go from there. Also educating students early on about what the clinical experience can be, and this is for all students, what the expectations are, what the work environment is like, what those expectations are, right? It's not like a classroom. And I think some students, it's kind of a shock when they realize like this is more like the real world and not like a classroom. So how can we educate them early and often on when their programs have a clinical requirement and what that might look like?
Okay, I have one last very quick question. It was kind of addressed in the sense was somebody had asked about staffing. So I, in particular, and actually many in Fulton have classes that are equipment intensive, have physical requirements. When it comes to hearing impaired students, I get great support, 100% kudos to you. But when it comes to like somebody who literally has no mobility or can't, we don't get people to help us. And it's not that we don't want to teach them, but we need somebody to be able to go with that student. Is that something that we need to make more noise about, make an ask so that you guys can get people to send to our classrooms?
Yeah, that's a really good example of we might not know that that's happening in that classroom, and we might be able to look at the student situation and go, okay, we need to provide a lab aid. And a lab aid is an accommodation we could provide. But if we don't know that that's what's happening, we might not be able to look into that. So that's one of those. And sometimes we've had students sort of kind of need one, but not kind, and that kind of thing, we might not get good information. So hearing from you and saying, hey, this is what I'm noticing with this student, absolutely good feedback for us. So we can figure out if there's some other accommodation that we need to consider.
Okay, but just do know the different campuses, I think, are resourced differently. I have asked in the past. And anyway, but we do have one last question on
Yes,
Zoom. Go
this is
ahead.
for real. Final comment. Senator Dalmas, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you. I'm unmuted, but not on video because of bandwidth issues, but that's probably okay for everybody. Hey, the question that you answered a few iterations ago where you had talked about the link that you can click in the accommodation email regarding flexible deadlines. I was just wondering if perhaps it could be that the students that receive the flexible deadline accommodation could be required to submit what you were referring to their instructor as far as looking at their syllabus and envisioning how those accommodations would be applied to the class. And then if maybe they need assistance with that, they could reach out. But it would be helpful if maybe that could be part of that accommodation being granted. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback. It's something we have to be mindful of the interactive process. One of the things we have to consider is that we can't leave students to negotiate their own accommodations. And so that's we marry that fine line between that with our form, but it's definitely something we've considered. So I appreciate that feedback.
Great, thank you. It would just start that first step. Thanks very much.
I want to thank you for coming here and explaining a lot of this because, we can't know everything. This is a huge ship we are all on. And I think, you are doing a formidable job. we would like to help get you guys more people in there for more support. So all right, thank you. Okay, now we have first read. We have no unfinished business. So we're going to begin new business with our first reads from CAPSI to prepare you for motions. We will be that we'll be acting on our next Senate meeting. Denise Bodman will be handling the motions for CAPSI today for the first reads.
Hello, everybody. I have returned. Claudia unfortunately is not feeling well, so she asked me to fill in. Since we're at the beginning of the year, as a reminder, CAPSI is a committee that's made up of faculty members from all campuses and is designed to represent the entire university. We're a little microcosm. Curricular and academic programs are brought to CAPSI after undergoing a fairly rigorous developmental process. First reads allow the committee to hear from you guys about potential problems before the committee meets. We then meet and decide if a program should move forward to you, the Senate, or be returned for changes. So the first reads for this Senate meeting begin with Appendix A. If you look at Appendix A, this is a program or a change that does not return to the Senate. This we just handle in CAPSI. These are usually little minor changes. So this comes from the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts School of Art name change of an undergraduate concentration from BFA in Art Intermedia to BFA in Art Expanded Arts. Now the other first reads will return to you after CAPSI meets. So if you have any questions or concerns, contact us before we have our meeting. We have motion 2023-27, request from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, Mass Communication for the establishment of a graduate degree, MA in Strategic Communication. Motion 2023-28, request from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, School of Human Evolution and Social Change for the establishment of an undergraduate degree, BS in Global Health Motion. Motion, Global Health. Motion 2023-29, request from the Herberger Institute for Design and Arts, School of Music, Dance, and Theater for the establishment of undergraduate certificate, Vocal Pedagogy. Motion 2023-30, request from the Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions, School of Public Affairs for the establishment of undergraduate degrees, BS in Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Motion 2023-31, request from the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College Division of Teacher Preparation for the disestablishment of undergraduate degree, BAE in Special Education and Elementary Education. Motion 2023-32, request from the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College Division of Teacher Preparation for the disestablishment of undergraduate degree, BAE in Early Childhood and Early Childhood Special Education. And finally, motion 2023-33, request from the Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions, School of Public Affairs for the disestablishment of undergraduate degree, BA in Community Development. Again, this is a first read, so there's no feedback, but let us know if you have any issues. Thank you.
Well, thank you. If you do have any questions or comments about these proposals that will go before CAPSI for review at their next meeting, please contact me or Claudia Sadowski-Smith, and our CAPSI chair, as soon as possible if you have questions or comments on that. We have no additional motions here, which brings us to our second reads and action items, beginning with new course proposals that were distributed to you via email on January 17th. These proposals will be handled in gross. Does anyone wish to remove any of the new course proposals from the list that was distributed? Okay. Hearing none, we will vote on these courses on gross. Please go ahead and vote.
Okay, the voting should be open. And do you approve of Senate Motion 2023-27 new course proposals in gross? A for yes, B for no, C to abstain. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. The motion passes with 96 votes, 99%.
All right. Okay, that motion is passed. So we also have two motions that have been brought by CAPSI. We will handle each motion separately. Denise, would you like to do the honors?
All right, so these are motions that CAPSI already considered and passed and brings forward to you and for discussion if you'd like. Motion 2023-16, request from the College of Integrative Sciences and Arts for the establishment of an undergraduate certificate, organizational leadership.
Okay. This request has been offered from the College of Integrative Sciences and Arts, establishing the undergraduate certificate in organizational leadership. Is there any discussion on this request? No, okay. Hearing none, we will now vote on this motion.
So I bundle them both, the two. Do you want to read the other one too?
It doesn't say engross this.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
All right, I'll go ahead and read the second one and we'll have discussion for that one. Motion 2023-25, request from the College of Global Futures School of Complex Adaptive Systems for the establishment of a graduate degree, PhD in Complex Adaptive Systems Science.
Okay. We will now vote. Oh, are there any? Okay. Sorry, we have different conflicting scripts here. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, we will now vote. I believe it's on gross, both at the same time, right?
Yes, so we have the poll in front of you. Let me activate it. Okay, it reads, let me remove that. Do you approve of the CAPSI motions in gross as read on 1/30/2023? This includes both motions that were read. And the answer is yes, A for yes, B for no, or C to abstain. We have fast votes here. Here we go. Ending the poll. The motion passes with 102 votes, 98%.
All right. That has passed. So we'll now move on to Senate committee reports. Okay. As we have no further motions or resolutions, the new business is concluded, allowing us to turn to Senate committee reports. We will have a report first from Jeffrey Kingsbury, Chair of the Committee on Committees. Jeffrey.
Hi, thanks, Penny.
Yes, of course.
Hi, this is Jeff Kingsbury. I'm the chair of the Committee on Committees. And for those of you who are not completely familiar with what that committee does, we helped staff all of the standing committee assignments back in August, if you remember. And we are also charged with assisting the Senate leadership and the Senate staff in administering the upcoming elections for the elected committees and for the campus president-elect positions. And so I was a little bit alarmed to see in Maria's triangulation question that 28% of the respondents did not realize that survey soliciting nominations actually did go out on January 25th. So please, this is an appeal to all of the membership to work with the members of the assembly of your constituency to try to come up with a robust list of nominations for all of the campus president-elect positions and for the elected committee positions that are enumerated in that survey. The timeline is that the survey has gone out in mid-February. The nominations will be reviewed in March, roughly in mid-March. Elections will happen And in April, the election results will be announced. And so we all would like to have a robust continuation of the shared governance that we're part of, and making sure that we have a robust list of candidates is a big part of that. So please, let's all do what we can to make sure that we have a lot of nominations and candidates for those positions. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to stress how important that is. If we want shared governance, we have to get in and govern. We have to be part of the process. So please get people to participate and spread that information around your units as well. Okay, then we're going to move to University Services and Facilities Committee. Chad Kennedy, Polytechnic Campus.
There you go.
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so Maria sent out, what's that? Oh, my head's gone. It's better if I sit. Sorry about that. So we sent out, I believe we had Maria sent out another email with regards to our USFC suggestion box that we wanted to pilot. And I wanted to clarify too, because there was some confusion that we wanted to pilot with just the Senate right now. So you can give us some feedback on what you like, what you don't like, and just email us any feedback. And you can email me directly at ckennedy@asu.edu. And the goal here is to separate out two things. The other thing that we put in the email was the ASU service ticket system, which is in existence. So if you go to My ASU, go to the services tab, and then down under facilities, there's actually a whole set of things that you can already link. And those are for kind of immediate needs, quick turnaround, you've got an emergency, the bathroom's flooding, whatever that is. This is actually more of a longer term feedback mechanism. We're trying to create another feedback loop in with the facility services for planning, suggestions for the future, new types of spaces, those types of things. Or if there's an ongoing thing that doesn't seem to get addressed with the already existing system. So we're creating another feedback system, and we wanted to at least pilot it with the Senate first before we send it out to the broader faculty and also to staff. So please, if you can, please respond to that email so we get some data to start working with. We sent one out over Christmas break, but I think everybody was on Christmas break. So, so we didn't get a whole lot of activity then, but pretty much that's what we'd like, is to get your guys' feedback, try it out, and let us know what you think. So that's pretty much that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chad. The floor is now open for any senator to bring up announcements, issues, concerns, or questions. And I will go around to the different campuses. So we're going to start with downtown first. Are there any questions from downtown? Hello?
No questions from
Okay.
downtown. Thank you.
All right. And now we're going to move to Poly. Are there any questions from the Polytechnic campus?
Actually, Penny, I do have a request.
Well, go for it.
So, and this is, to you and to the committee on committees. Since we had such a high number of people who actually said no, could that call for nominations email or request be sent out again to everybody? Could it be resent?
Can that be done, Maria? As long as they haven't started it, we can resend the.
Right. So the link is meant to be used only once. So if you haven't opened it, I can technically re-forward it to you and you should be able to use it. So yes.
Look for the
That's all.
email.
I will send it out to everyone because I don't know who has or has not replied. So I will send it out tomorrow. Be on the lookout for it. It'll have the same subject line. It'll say Spring 2023 Senate nominations.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And it's also important to have more than one person running for a political office. Well, I mean, we're not technically, well, whatever, Senate. You need more than one person. Okay, so really kind of dig in there to find people who are willing to participate. It's an amazing experience, I will tell you that. Okay, so now we go to Tempe, It's the best experience of my life.
I'm Laurie Stoff. I'm Senator from Barrett, the Honors College, and I would just like to bring your attention as my colleagues to an event that ASU is planning through the T.W. Lewis Center. We're bringing in speakers on January 30th at Gamage and charging $20 to $50 ticket to hear individuals, including Robert Kiyosaki, who has written a book about why college is not worth it and no one should go. It's a scam. So speaking on what Provost Gonzalez earlier commented about how one of the things we want to do is try to encourage people to go to college. This is actively working against that. In addition, Dennis Prager, who has said things like the police were absolutely appropriate in their treatment of George Floyd, who has actively denounced transgender people, and Charlie Kirk, who is the founder and head of Turning Point USA, who you probably all well know, but keeps the professor watch list. The Lewis Center is paying these, meaning ASU is paying these individuals money to come, plus they're raising money through the tickets. Tickets for students will be free, and they're actively encouraging students to get involved with this. I don't really understand how, as a faculty who are trying to promote an inclusive environment, as President Dolan said earlier, especially with regard to condemning the anti-DEI measures that our state is trying to implement, this is actively contributing to that. How are we supposed to welcome students of color onto our campus if these are the kind of speakers that we are promoting? How are we promoting college going if we are bringing in speakers who've made money on telling people that college is a scam? The Barrett faculty has composed a letter that we will be circulating to leadership. We would like to circulate it among the senators and among the faculty more broadly. So we'd really appreciate your support in opposing this event. Thank you.
Thank you. And you said it's tonight? Oh, February.
February 8th. I'm sorry. Correct.
February
February 8th.
Okay, thank you. Free speech is a sticky wicket, isn't it?
All right, I'm Rocco Spurner, School of Mathematical and Statistical Sciences. Can I detach this?
And get it off?
Yeah. All right. I think many of us were disappointed that the latest merit raise did not live or was not equal in size to inflation. But I think the bigger issue is that merit raises have not been keeping us up with inflation for a very long time. And if you look back like 10 years, I think inflation far exceeds what we've received in merit raises. And this is an answer, or this is an issue to which I would like to get some answers from the provost. Just to put this into perspective, in 2007, the starting salary for a lecturer, at least in my unit, was $52K. And in today's dollars, that's 73. And that puts the 60K, quite a bit in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, my question to the provost would be, and I would like to have a detailed answer to this, where's the money leak? Where is the inefficiency? Because we keep raising class sizes, we keep raising tuition, and yet it seems like we're paid less and less and less when you adjust for inflation.
I certainly am not defending the fact that we don't have raises better, but I also know we don't have an endless bucket, and I can't totally answer this. This is at the provost level, but I know we work at a deficit to begin with. So be careful judging X students and X money. And that
I'm not making accusations.
No,
It's
I
more
know
like
that.
I would like some
transparency.
answers,
Yes.
know.
And yes, I absolutely agree.
And, transparency is a good point, because it seems like there's this excessive culture of secrecy, of executive secrecy, like the decisions are not explained. Okay, so this year they could give us 6%, but 7 were impossible for some reason. Why were they impossible? Why not 8%? What made that impossible? They just give us this number, and that's just the best they could do.
Yeah.
And by the way, we've added online teaching, which I think comes with significantly less overhead to the university. I mean, to run an online course costs the university less than running an in-person course, because there's no facilities, right? So it seems like the economics have shifted in favor of paying us more, but that's not happening. It's like, I know the bucket is finite, but I'm always wondering, does the bucket have leaks? You know?
That's a good question.
And what are they?
Yeah, and as I said, as I had mentioned earlier, we've discussed this at the UAC. We would like to have a better understanding also. You know, how much will be shared, we can't promise you, but we are starting a task force in the UIC, and it's about financial transparency so that people can have an understanding of why certain decisions are made. The depth of the response from leadership, we can't, you know, we don't know at this stage, but we are actively putting together a task force to ask questions and have more transparency.
You know, and transparency would be good just for its therapeutic benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, if you can only raise my salary by 6%, at least let me understand why that is the case. So I don't have to be so angry.
Well, and yeah, no, I totally hear you, Oshus, and that gets back to the whole merit thing, and that's, yeah, I understand. Excuse me. And we have LaDawn, who probably is a great answer for this.
I just wanted to encourage everyone to really think about this president role. It rocks. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. This is me fulfilling my responsibility of reaching out directly to senators to please ask you to submit names of your colleagues, make sure that they're willing, make sure, look at the email. It tells you, you know, what you get, what you have to give, and all of that stuff. And then I'm happy to answer any further questions.
And I will say in my off the cuff manner, it's like, if you want to see how the sausage is made, it's one of the best ways to get involved in the governance at ASU. And you don't see it. But what I'm saying is you actually get to be in the room with certain people and ask these questions. You may not always get the answer you want, but you actually get to, in a polite, non-adversarial manner, ask the questions. So please encourage people.
I have a comment. Penny, this is Hala. I have a comment on the previous senator who's a mathematician. Transparency.
The media center?
I'm sorry?
What?
I was saying the senator who just talked about mathematics. Mathematics is really a great venue to have transparency. In the past, ASU had a committee that used linear regression to put data points for all the salaries of the faculty, and they made salary adjustments based on the graph. So if you guys want any transparency in any task force, we need a mathematical model that is very transparent, unbiased, that is practically plotting data and making adjustments so that we do understand what that 6% is coming from. We are all educated. We can understand things. We understand that the 2% raise is nothing compared to the inflation rates. Yet the administration listens to us like we are idiots, that we don't understand what is coming over we are all our heads. So yes, mathematics is a discipline that can be used to form a linear regression model so that we have transparency as we really expected from the institution. I really didn't understand where the 4, the 6, or the 6.3 came from. I totally agree with the previous senator, and I really encourage you on the task force to ask a mathematician from Tempe, since they have more clout than anyone else, to create for us a model that will make this transparent as possible. Thank you, Penny.
Okay, are we volunteering you?
No, I
so you are
volunteered the other one from Tempe.
Yeah, we haven't done the task force, and we do need data.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, merit is a different thing than across the board. That's all I want to keep reiterating. But I think we do need more transparency, and we are working towards that aim. It's a big ship. That's all I can remind you.
But even the steps that the provost mentioned, the director, then the dean, then the provost, if they're all happy with each other about someone, that person will get the raise. So it's really not very it is really not as stepwise as it is indicated.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. So let's see, we finished Tempe West. Well, that's West. So anyone else? We've got 6 minutes.
I have some from Zoom if we're done with the campuses.
Speak fast.
Okay, Senator Broomberger, can you unmute?
Thank you, Maria. So I have a question. This is also related to the merit exercise. So I know, and I think the provost alluded to this a bit. I know that different colleges are allotted sort of different amounts of money. And I know it's a somewhat complex formula that's used to determine how much that pot will be. I've been told that it's tied to, for example, the number of tenure line faculty and the salary, the average salaries and so on. And I guess one thing I would like to ask for, if this task force is formed, is that we get more transparency about that approach as well, because it seems to me, at least from what I've heard, if that information is accurate, that following a system like we have now actually exacerbates the incredible salary discrepancies between different colleges. So for example, I'm in CISA, we are 3/4 non-tenure line faculty. If average salary plays a role into what that pot is, that means that a college that is historically underfunded in terms of salaries would get even less to support salary increases. And in fact, that seems to have been supported this year. I mean, certainly I have not polled all of the faculty and talked to all of the faculty, so this is purely anecdotal, but I don't know of anyone who got an increase that aligned with the numbers that Provost Gonzalez just provided us. So I have not talked to a single teaching faculty member in our college who got an increase in the 6% range. I'm
Well,
sure there probably are some, but it's certainly not the norm.
Well, it seems like one of the questions that will be addressed in this task force is how are the pots determined?
Absolutely, that would be
And
fantastic.
that is a question, doesn't, I do believe that, and my understanding is they're not proportional. In other words, it's not, everybody doesn't get the same chunk. But that is those are the kind of questions we will try to answer and share, because we do feel that, sunlight is the best way to understand these things and not get upset about it. And
Thank you.
yep, so definitely taken into account. Okay, I think Maria just told me. Okay, all right. Well, I hereby declare this meeting to be adjourned. Well, now